Hi, I'm Jess Fields. Welcome to the show. The other day I interviewed award-winning storm chaser Jeff Piotrowski. His Emmy-Award-winning footage has appeared on such platforms as National Geographic, TLC, the Discovery Channel, and many other places. He's chased over 900 tornadoes, 24 hurricanes, ice storms, wildfires, every kind of severe weather event really that you can imagine. And he tells us a lot of stories from that decades in storm chasing. Like here, let me play a clip for you.
We're running down the highway westbound, and it's getting dark, and I have Baseball Hill flying through the air. It sounds like torpedoes. Here going cutting, going by our heads. Baseball Hill. I can see the tornadoes coming to the section lane road west of the house about a half a mile, and sucking whole trees out of the ground like toothpicks and just going straight up in the air like pop bottle rockets. Okay, and I'm like, oh no, this is really, really bad.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Piotrowski not only tells us that story, but also takes us through his time with Hurricanes Harvey and Michael and the Joplin tornado, and also the time he was almost killed by a carjacker. Later in the interview, his wife Kat Piotrowski joins us and talks about what it's like to be married to a storm chaser. She handles his social media and edits the videos and sometimes joins him. This interview went for a few hours, so I've cut it into two pieces. And I think you'll agree, though, that this is a really interesting interview with storm chaser Jeff Piotrowski. Joining me now is storm chaser Jeff Piotrowski. He lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and has chased hundreds and hundreds of storms over decades. Jeff, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me on your podcast.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on because a lot of Houstonians and other coastal residents are aware of you because you seem to appear on the local news all the time after a major storm because you get great footage. I'm going to go straight in here and play one of the most riveting pieces of footage that I think many of your fans are very familiar with, and that is your coverage of Hurricane Harvey. Let me go ahead and play that now.
We're still in the northwest eye wall. If we stay in the sidewall and can't get in the eye in the calm winds, it's God help us here. Winds are really violent outside now. The whole car is rocking violently. That's right. Right now, I wall. That building is collapsed around me. It just collapsed. Oh my God. Next to me collapsed. Look at that. Oh my gosh, that was that. Okay. This is the north eye wall. We have catastrophic damage occurring now. Another roof just went by me. Oh my gosh. over above us right now, 145, 142.
Okay, Jeff, that is wow. That is really riveting. I
Yeah.
remember watching that when you first aired it, and you've got all that debris coming by and the structure behind you. I mean, what are you thinking in that moment? I mean, you must have
Well,
feared
there's
for
a
your
lot of
life.
stuff going on. So when we got to Rockport that day, as I drove in from Corpus, southeast the morning of, and looking at you look when you scout looking for locations, you look for, obviously it would be nice to be in a parking garage, something elevated on the coastline because it's flooding, and that was not available there. So you start looking for secure facilities. I talked to the emergency managers there in the city, and they found out, they told me, hey, go to the water tower. If the storm surge comes in, there's fortified facility there. Also, there's a school here. It's fortified. That's where the EOC and all the police were hanging out. But as the afternoon, late afternoon wore on, and I was on the east side of Rockport watching it jog just slightly to the right. I knew we were going to be in the northwest eye wall, and I thought, you know what, the winds are going to be parallel to the car wash, and it's not something that I would never want to do or recommend doing because it's extremely dangerous. But the winds were going to be 90 degrees to the car wash, and as it came ashore, as it's coming up from the south, the winds are going to be out of the east northeast. That's what they were, and I'm in the last garage. A car wash garage on the far western end, so it would have to go through a lot of bays before it ever got to me, and where I held out. And but as it unfolded, it it was intensifying. I could tell the pressure was dropping, and basically Rockport was going to be ground zero. This rapidly intensifying, going from Cat 3 to Cat 4, and the winds were getting up there, 120, 130 miles an hour. Reports both from the Hurricane Hunter, the buoy data. So you're looking at all this information. You're trying to figure out, okay, where's it going to track? Where's it going to be? The thing unusual about Harvey is it had a lot of lightning inside the eye wall, which is not unusual, but it had an extraordinary amount of lightning. And there's and with all landfalling hurricanes, you have little spin ups in the eye wall, little small vortexes, tornadoes in the eye walls that rotates around. And this one had a number of them. And so what happened? We had chasers back to my east along the highway there, and they actually witnessed the tornado going by their building. And actually, one tornado hit their three-story hotel. It tore off the whole south end of the hotel, just sheared off one big chunk, just came off the hotel, three-story hotel, about 4 blocks east of me. That same tornado comes down the road. It hits a CVS, portable CVS store next to me. And when it did, the entire store exploded. I mean, it exploded. And that was all the debris that hit the car wash at that point. You saw the debris, the cables. And at that point, things were coming apart. Literally, the roof above me was going up and down. I could see the I-beam starting to separate from the block walls. The block walls were starting to bulge and buckle. So at that point, I knew it was great. Then I got a call from one of the state officials at the EOC and said, hey, we realize that you're in extreme peril there. And if you need a tech refuge in a store, we've already notified the Rockport Police Department. You may have to go inside one of the stores and take shelter in the eye wall. They said you won't survive the backside because it was so ferocious. The debris was about 2 to 3 feet deep everywhere. There's storm surge. There's water about 2 foot deep on the highway right in front of me, about a half a block. But I knew if I could make it back to Walmart, about 3 blocks west of me, they're a little bit higher elevation by a couple feet. And they had this parking garage on the east side of the Walmart there. They had this big, huge dock that went below ground about 6 feet, as you back up the big 18-wheelers. And so I made my way over there during the eye wall, had to clear out the debris from the car wash, made my way over there. And that was extremely challenging, both with telephone poles down, wires, lots of debris and flooding. I get over there and I find 2 other storm chasers I know, Jim Eds and Jeff Gammons over there. And we hook up and we take about a 15, 20-minute break. We eat some apples and oranges. You gotta stay hydrated, and have some water. And we at this point, the eye wall's over. So I look up and saw the eye up in the eye. And I remember that the storms were about 55,000 feet high. It's like being in the bottom of a 55-gallon drum, but even more so. And you're looking up and it's partly cloudy, not 100% clear. And I can see the lightning in the storm going around, and as it passes, like being in a merry-go-round, there goes a storm as they're moving to the west at about 75 miles an hour around you. And as this wall, moves northward, I'm constantly looking at radar, and I could see it's like 4 miles southwest of me, 3 miles, the backside's coming. And the scariest thing of all is when we get in the car, we know we're going to go to shelter because it comes back. Well, right before we get in the car and go try to find refuge at the Walmart, is I can hear
The only way to describe it is like 1,000 wine glasses breaking at the same time, because you have to remember 75 to 80% of the buildings have failed. A lot of the building roofs are off. And so now you've got all this debris everywhere. So when the backside comes, it picks up all that debris very rapidly, and you got millions of debris going the other direction. Literally millions of pieces of debris are flying the other direction in the air on the backside of the eye wall. So you got to get out of that. You got to get out of the path of that.
So let me pause for a second so we can describe to people that maybe aren't familiar with how hurricanes work. And I'm
Right.
not super familiar, but just a few basic things.
Sure.
So you're talking about the eye wall. Obviously, the eye is the center of the hurricane, where it's basically calm, right? There's not much
Calming. Yeah. They're 10 miles an hour to zero. The
Yeah.
winds are calmer. Yeah.
fairly calm, and it spins around that base. Now, that what we saw with the car wash, where you were hiding out in the car wash there, that was the first side of the eye wall. But isn't it so that when you get to the backside, as you say, the backside's coming, that's kind of the dirty side of the storm? Is that right? That's kind
Well,
of
the front side is technically the northeast quadrant, which would have been about just east of me, about 3 or 4 miles. You want to be in the upper right-hand corner. The northeast quadrant of the storm is the really bad side, the northeast quadrant. So that you're getting storm surge and wind on the northeast side. We're going to eventually be on the western, southwestern side on the back side of the wall. And that wall hits us. It's very ferocious, to put it mildly.
And what you're saying is all that debris that gets kicked up really in the initial hit, then it
Yep.
gets kicked up again. And it's going in the opposite direction because the wind
Right,
is
like
coming
torpedoes. The only way to describe it, it's really like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of missile debris moving at 100 to 150 miles an hour through the air, from the surface right at ground level all the way up to hundreds, if not thousands of feet in the air. And that missile debris could be 2x4s, telephone poles, it's sheet metal, it's glass, it's everything you can imagine, billboard signs, and that stuff as it flies the other direction. Now, here's another thing that happens. I wish I had an example of this. I could actually use maybe a deal of Tom's, but if you think about I use my coffee cup here. If the wind is from, as at my location is at the car wash, if the winds are out of the northeast, hitting the right side of this the cup here, as the winds change direction and the winds come around to the northwest side, it literally peels. It's like peeling a can opening. Okay. So as the wind changes direction on your house, it lifts one corner of the house up. And as the wind changes direction, it starts to lift in the other side up until the point where, as a hurricane approaches you or passes you, it literally peels your roof off. It's like literally opening a can, almost like peanut butter. You start on one side and you keep prying it up. And then as the wind changes directions, it'll prop enough that it'll finally peel the roof off. And that's exactly what happens with the hurricanes. It'll start on one side of the house and it starts lifting up the house. And as the winds change direction, and sometimes it can be violent change, it's a direction, it'll go to the other direction as the hurricane passes. It just keeps peeling on the roof until finally the roof peels off. And that's what happened during Hurricane Harvey. All the big hurricanes, that's pretty typical. And we saw that with Hurricane Harvey as well.
So we were, when you were describing this story, you're hiding out at the Walmart. You were just at the car wash, and I'm not done with asking you about that. But you're at the Walmart. You hear 1,000 wine glasses breaking. Then what happens?
Right. And so the back edge, so you hear this tremendous, and you have to remember, power's out. It is pitch black, like it is so dark, I can't describe it. You remember, you're in a city on the coastline, and it's so dark, you can't see 10 feet without our headlights on. I mean, we're the only headlights on probably in the city, literally out in the car, okay? So
Right.
it's pitch black. And you hear this horrible roar, and as the backside of the eye approaches, the ground starts vibrating. My steering wheel and the car will vibrate because there's so much debris in the air. Everything around you, including telephone poles and buildings, are vibrating and shaking. Your ground is vibrating like an earthquake. Okay. And by the way, a lot of times when the hurricanes hit landfall, they actually will cause the Richter scale. You can actually monitor them on the Richter scale. You watch the big pounding waves and the vibration of the ground can be picked up on the Richter scale. So my hand is vibrating in the car. The roar's getting louder by the second. And all of a sudden you start hearing the big stuff coming, the big missile debris. You hear bam! You hear something horrible fly through the air and you're like, uh-oh, that was really big. It's not the normal. There's a lot of things that sound really bad that are like really small, little missile debris at 100 miles an hour, but you get the big stuff like a
air conditioner coming off the Walmart. It's this 5-ton air conditioner that comes peeling off the roof of the Walmart. When that hits the ground in front of you about 20 yards, it literally sounds like a car just landed in front of you. I mean, it is horrific.
Well, presumably, Jeff, let's say that, somebody that didn't know what they were doing was trying to do what you actually did, and these other storm officers that are more experienced, and they parked in just slightly the wrong location. Presumably, any piece of this debris, because you can't see anything, could come in and totally kill you, right?
Right. Yeah, you could be killed extremely easy. Yes, very easy. Yes.
So how do you know? I mean, obviously, you take precautions and you try to get on the right side of the Walmart and everything. But realistically, how dangerous is this? I mean, you're in that car wash and the walls are vibrating. And
the car wash still was extremely dangerous. The car wash, I'm not going to kid you. The car wash was extremely dangerous. It was bad. It was dangerous to be in that position. I prefer to be in a park. We normally in a hurricane on the coastline would like to be in parking garages because they're generally 2-foot thick concrete. They can withstand winds well over 200 miles an hour in most cases. And if you have, a lot of times in a center parking garage, the bigger parking garages in the more modern cities, they'll have a center kind of where the stairs go down or an elevator goes down from higher floors. And you'll have this big 50-foot by 50-foot of solid concrete in the middle. So you can literally pull up in the middle of the car, the middle of the parking garage from away from the outside walls and be protected from the wind blowing by. And then literally, when I describe this, it's very hard for people to understand. In a parking garage with a concrete structure, where if I'm behind the concrete structure or wall, it could be like 0 miles an hour winds where I'm located. That literally 2 feet in front of me, the winds could be 120 miles an hour. It's that kind of a gradient. You go from nothing to winds over 100, literally just feet from your face. And
so it depends on where the wind is flowing in the parking garage, basically where the channel is, what's open.
Correct.
The parking garage.
Correct.
So in the car wash, if that car wash that you were in, and if you're listening on the podcast, I would encourage you to go and watch on YouTube, and I'll have the video from Jeff and Kat Piotrowski's channel on here that shows this. But to describe it, basically the car wash looks to be maybe a foot thick brick walls or something.
Yeah, it's a block. It's a block, center block car wash.
And at some point you go, the walls are vibrating. And I don't think that was in the video that I played, but it's just like, it looks like it could collapse at any moment. I mean,
the last couple minutes of the hurricane, and this is with most hurricanes, providing they don't stall, that last 15 or 20 minutes right before you get in the calm, literally it's that last 3 to 5 miles is absolutely horrendous. And it's the most scariest, it's the most dangerous. That's when the winds are the most intense. That's where you get the tornadoes inside the eye wall rotating by. And it's just this roar is so loud, it's deafening. I mean, I've had grown men with me before, and I've seen grown men cry during because it is scary as you could ever imagine.
So before we go back to the Walmart in the story, and you're in the car wash, okay, it cuts out the video on Periscope where you were streaming this, and I think there were 600,000 people watching or something.
About 900,000 live from around the world.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the biggest by far ever at that time on Periscope.
Yeah, we broke all records on Periscope that night.
So people are watching this, and I was one of them, and they're watching it, and they're amazed at the blue shed that's staying there. I'll ask you about the blue shed, but at some point, the Periscope video cuts off.
Right.
Because and frankly, it's amazing to me that it didn't cut off earlier with cell towers. I don't even know how that happened.
Another key point when I'm scouting is I found a cell tower right across the street from the car wash. It was a Verizon cell tower. So I have an app that tells me the speed.
Okay.
So I know exactly where I'm at connected wide. So I had very strong because I'm right across the street from that cell tower. So that was another reason I chose that location is I'm right across the street from the cell tower. Wow. And I know they have a backup generator there and they'll run on fuel or propane or diesel for about 5 or 6 hours before a lot of times those run out. But that was another reason I chose that. But it stayed with us till 99% of the hurricane.
That's it. I mean, it's so incredible. 150 mile an hour winds or something, and you've still got cell service. I mean, it is almost unbelievable. Did that cell tower get destroyed, presumably?
It has some damage.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you
Yeah.
cut off the Periscope video cuts off, and your wife Kat is watching in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I mean,
Right.
did she think you died? I mean, what? Honestly,
Um, uh, no, I think she knew that the cell service was, because I told her, I said, look, the cell service, I don't know if it's going to stay up 5 minutes into the coverage or 2 hours. I was actually stunned myself how long it did stay up, to be honest with you. So it didn't I don't think it totally surprised her. And of course, at that time, within seconds, people were sending tweets out how we just watched Jeff die live on Periscope, and that went viral. And people already had stuff. I mean, it's amazing how fast people generate stuff on social. They like, watch Jeff get killed live, and it went out and says breaking, Piotrowski just got killed live on Periscope, and that's not true. I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. And so, and then when I took the picture of me, GM, and Jeff, and I said, we survived, we're at the Walmart in the center of the eye, and I sent that picture out. We had a quarter of a bar, literally a quarter, not a full bar, a quarter of a bar. I mean, it wouldn't even register. It would like say no service. It would come up with a tiny little bit of a deal that you'd say quarter of a bar. And it's like, can't even make a cell phone call. You make a call to like break up, and go, digitally. I was like, can anybody, I mean, chances of getting a piece of video out or a picture is slim and none. Okay. And knowing that, I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So I did get a message to Kathy, I'm alive. And she goes, the blue shed, the blue shed's training. The blue shed, everybody wants to know. I said, what, honey, I don't know anything about the blue shed. All I know is I'm trying to survive. Here comes the back eye. I gotta go shelter. We'll worry about blue shed later. She goes, everybody wants to know about blue shed.
all right. Well, you brought it up. So you're in the car wash, and I have to say, as a longtime watcher of you on Periscope, everyone always has to kind of make a little bit of fun of your Oklahoma accent, car wash.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
W-O-R-S-H,
Yeah.
not
Yes.
S-H, which
Yes.
frankly, I resemble that remark as a Texan, car wash. But
yes.
so you're in the car wash, and anyway, this thing that it does, it appears to be like a shed you'd have in your backyard, and it's blue,
Right.
And all this debris is flying by, and like there's the hood of a car, there's a sign, these metal buildings, pieces of buildings, and this dadgum shed is not moving at all.
Doesn't move.
So what about the blue shed? I mean, this is a bit of
So we went back and visited later. They had me down, the Rockport Chamber of Commerce had me down to talk about hurricane preparedness the following season. When I was there, I actually met the people that own the car wash, and we looked at the building inside, and it's basically a block building, a center block, concrete building, center block, and with siding on the outside of it. So it looks like it's a wood frame structure, but actually it's a center block building behind that.
Center block.
And the number one requested item from that blue shed, believe it or not, is the paint color. This is a golden little nugget. The paint color from that blue shed is a number one requested. And over the course of 6 months a year, I've had thousands of people around the world, all over the world, say, Jeff, here's my picture. It was brown or green or yellow, and I painted up blue from around the world. So we have people around the world that painted their sheds blue to be part of the blue shed team globally. So
what is the paint color on the blue shed? If people,
it's kind of a turquoise, kind of a rural Caribbean deep blue color, kind of a turquoise blue, kind of like if you're in the Caribbean. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if I get the exact name of the paint, I'll put it in the description so people can replicate their own blue shed.
Sure, absolutely.
It has become a very popular thing. And when you watch Jeff on Periscope, you see the hashtag blue shed. And you know, those are people who've been watching Jeff for a very, very long time.
It's on Google. You can go to Google and type in blue shed. It'll take you right to it.
Okay, so back in Walmart, and you've got a air conditioner that just slammed down in front of you 20 something.
So all three of us were in our cars, and we decided, let's get this front southeast corner, because the winds are going to come out of the west northwest at 140. So we hadn't been in that southeast corner of the two walls more than about 30 seconds, and we hear this tremendous clanging, banging, crashing sound. It's the skylights are now coming off the huge 4x4. Walmart's got these big, 8 foot by 8 foot skylights, in all the stores.
Right.
The skylight comes off and it lands right in front of the vehicle, and the skylight explodes. There's glass everywhere. And Jim looks over at me. He says, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. Next thing we know, here comes the air conditioner ripped off the top, and it goes about 100 feet in front of us into the parking lot. Almost it's an 18-wheeler. And that's another story. We have a guy in an 18-wheeler trying to get on the right side of the vehicle because he's got a load for Walmart to unload. And he just got to town about an hour before the hurricane hit. And we said, go to this side of the building and back up against the wall, and they'll keep you from flipping. And he did that. He never flipped. But the other 18-wheelers in the parking lot flipped.
Okay.
Wait a minute. What? Hold on. What Yahoo is driving into town in an 18-wheeler to go to
Well,
Walmart with?
He's got a load to deliver, and he's he's getting the job done. This guy,
Like,
he might have got there like 6 or 7 right before dark. He's in town.
oh my gosh.
Take his load back up to the up to Dallas or something, or Fayetteville, Arkansas, where Walmart distribution center is. So he is sat there, and of course he sees his hand and goes, "What should I do?" I said, "Well, you're on the wrong side right now," because he was 90 degrees to the wind. He was pointing north south on the west side of Walmart. That was fine as it's approaching us, but now the wind's going to be out of the west northwest at 140. He's going to flip immediately. I mean, as soon as those winds hit, he's going to flip in like 5 seconds. So we go to him and say, "Look, follow us, go the other side, and I want you to back in down this dock, kind of where he unloads anyway." I said, "Back down this dock, and you're not going to flip, because all the wind and debris is going to go over the 18-wheeler." And that's what he did. And it kept him safe, and it kept his 18-wheeler from turning over. And so the other good news is he would already be in the dock. And so when they opened the doors the following day or 2 days later, he's sitting there and he's ready to unload. Okay. So there's a positive side of that.
So I'm going to pull up, and people on the people who are watching on YouTube can see this picture. Here's a picture from Rockport after Harvey, just
Right.
one. Here's let's see.
Yeah, yeah.
Here's another one.
Yeah, that was back to my west there, about 2 miles. That was the large marina that took a very heavy toll. Yeah, there was about 400 volts in that marina there that took a direct hit, and the building partially collapsed.
Here's a building.
Yeah, we had a lot of embedded tornadoes in the eye, and so there's a lot of tornado damage as well there.
It's incredible. I mean, why don't people, Jeff, when these things are coming, local officials, we had County Judge Ed Emmett on, who led the Houston area through Harvey and Hurricane Ike. And if you are done after this interview with Jeff, I would highly encourage you to watch his comments on emergency management. Well, why don't people take this stuff seriously? They just don't pay attention to these warnings, and then they stay.
I think the problem is with society today is that people always compare what hurricane they've been through in the past. Like, people try to compare before Harvey came in. They said, "Well, we survived Ike in Houston. We survived this. This particular hurricane didn't create this much damage when I was at this location, from 20 years ago." Remember, one of the key things about hurricanes and tornadoes, no two hurricanes are ever alike in history, and no two tornadoes are alike, no matter the same intensity. I can take 5 Cat 4s and take them into Rockport, and all 4 of them or 5 of them are going to do different kinds of damage. It depends on the angle, the approach, the time of the year, high tide, low tide, how fast they're moving. All hurricanes are going to give you different impacts, even in the same exact part of the county that you got hit before 5 years earlier. They're going to have different effects on your house and your building. I mean, that's standard. And that's what a lot of people don't understand.
So when we look at a situation like Hurricane Ike, which was about 10 years before Harvey, and of course a different type of situation than Harvey, because Harvey was flooding and Ike really was a destructive wind and so forth. But people were kind of jamming the roadways, I guess, because they at the last minute realized, oh my gosh, this is really serious. But it wasn't until the very last day or two that everyone suddenly wanted to get out of town. And then they're stuck on the freeways, which is even worse than being in their house.
Right, that's correct. So I was down there at Galveston when Ike hit, and saw the marina burn down and the flooding in around the city, and it was bad. One of the things we've noticed over the last 5 or 10 years, especially the last 5 years, is that when you have hurricanes, especially we had a Hurricane Michael 2 years ago in Pensacola, we did a lot of damage there, and then you just had the Hurricane Harvey. As we get into 2020 season, and we'll talk about that for a few seconds, is all the signs are pointing to above normal hurricane activity, as well as the Gulf water's warmer than normal. It's about a little over 2.5 degrees above normal right now. Also, the Atlantic Basin is very warm. We're going to go to La Nina type pattern, which means weak wind shear over the Atlantic and the Gulf Coast areas as we get into summer and late summer and fall. What does that mean? That means as we get the tropical waters really heated up and we start getting the waves from Africa coming across the Southern Atlantic Basin, the chances of a fair amount of hurricanes and intense hurricanes is very high this year. So I got multiple messages for reviewers. Whether you're in Brownsville, Texas, or you're all the way up in Maine, if you live anywhere near the coast, you don't have to be on the coast. Even if you're inland 10 or 20 miles, I would think every person needs to review their insurance on their house. Did you know that 80% of the people's houses are underinsured? Even if you got cost replacement, a lot of those have caps on them. 125% of your face value, or 200% of your face value if you got a Cadillac plan. Most people are uninsured. Most people don't realize you're just looking at $25,000 to $50,000 on the average home to remove debris before you even talking about rebuilding your house. And in most people's policies, that means they won't have enough money left over just from removing the debris to rebuild their home. Okay, so that's a huge issue across the entire United States. So it's flood insurance. I would absolutely, whether you're in a flood zone or not, get flood insurance. Okay, look what happened during Harvey. A lot of people flooded, by the hundreds of thousands of homes flooded. It never flooded in the history. Get flood insurance. And I'd recap everybody's hurricane, just their coverage on their house, period, because most people are underinsured. And I think those are critical tips. Do it now. Do it literally this week, starting Monday. Get a hold of your insurance agent and say, you know what? It's been 5 years, because all of us, you'll add something to a house. You buy new furniture. You put something else in the car. You spent $5,000 here or $3,000 here. Next thing you know, over 4 or 5 years, you've added $30,000, $40,000 to your house that the insurance company doesn't know about because you haven't told them yet. Okay, and so I would highly recommend people review their insurance. Get that done. Also, take out flood insurance along the coastal areas. And the other thing is, and this is the most important thing I'm going to say in my entire interview. Okay, I'm going to slow way down so people clearly hear this. Before the event happens, whether it be a tornado or the hurricane it's coming to your location, you need to film inside and outside of your home with your phone, a camera, and have a complete documentation room by room of your furniture, your clothes, if you got valuables, whether it be furs, jewelry, if you got motorcycles in the car. Now, there's a lot of guys have nice high-end cars. Film those kind of things. Do a complete documentation inside of your house, a couple of days before the hurricane hits, because if your house gets blown away by a tornado or something, you've got documentation 24 hours before the event. It's time-stamped. It's got a date on it. It said, this is what my house looked like on the inside before it was heavily damaged or destroyed. That way, when the adjusters come, you have stuff to stand on, and that one tip will save you potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars when it comes time to settle and value of what you said you have in the house. Because if it's blown away and gone, it's very difficult to prove it, okay? Unless you got receipts or there's a way to prove it. But that's my golden tip for anybody that lives on the coastline. As far as that goes, anywhere in America, but including Tornado Alley. But that's a thing I see over and over again by I can't tell you how many thousands of homes I see that sit empty for years because they haven't settled with the insurance company because they were underinsured or they didn't have enough insurance on the property, so they can't afford to rebuild it because they didn't have enough insurance to begin with. So I would tell everyone on the coast, and this year, all the signs are way above normal. It's going to be a bad year. Look at tornado season already. We're ramped up. We've had killer tornadoes, big tornadoes, and the hurricane season by all the scientists and all the models. As we get into summer, it's going to ramp up. It's going to be a very bad hurricane season, all the coastal areas.
Jeff Piotrowski is telling us that this season is going to be really bad. So Jeff, just to recap here, your 3 quick tips. I'm sure you have more. Number 1, make sure if you live on the coast somewhere that you have flood insurance.
Yes.
And number 2, review your current insurance for hurricane coverage. Number 3, make sure before any storm comes that at least 24 hours before you take full video, photos, and documentation of everything in your house. Anything else?
Absolutely. Those are the big ones. Those are the 3 big ones. Obviously, during the hurricane, right before the hurricane, you need to have cash. You need to just like we're going through with the pandemic right now, the COVID-19. Just like the experiences we're having right now, where you have to buy extra food, water supply. The other problem we're going to have this year with the hurricane season and the COVID and the pandemic, it's going to be a double-edged sword. And that is, you need in your hurricane supply, you need to have bacteria wipes like the Clorox wipes, those things in your hurricane, because this year, unusual.
is that, you know, if we can start getting hurricanes in September, October, as we're going into the second season of potentially the pandemic again in the fall, at the same time we're having hurricanes, if you have a situation where you have cities that have been hit or devastated and you have a lot of people that are out of their homes, that's going to be a real deal. So mask, Clorox, bleach, those things, you need to add that to your hurricane kit besides water and food. And I think this year, even probably the most critical year, you've got to have food, water, and those things ahead of time. It's going to be more important this year, in my opinion, than probably the last 25 years. That's how worried I am. And most people in this business are saying behind closed doors in our conference calls is they're very worried about what's going to happen late this summer and going into fall, because it looks really, really, it could be bad.
So Jeff, you're saying that with the pandemic and all the existing economic chaos and the hospitals in some areas being maybe not totally overwhelmed, but certainly full if they're not overwhelmed, that any major weather disaster would really create a potentially catastrophic situation.
It's going to compound it dramatically. Yes, absolutely. And you've got to think, if you look at where we're at today in America, you've got to think ahead. You can't wait till the last minute. You can't wait till a week before the hurricane's out. And most insurance policies, they have a 30-day exclusion. If you're along the coastal areas, you're increasing your insurance, they got a 30-day exclusion. So you really want to do it right now. I would, like I said, I cannot emphasize this enough. You need to look at your insurance coverage across the entire coastal line, even inland 20, 30 miles. Look what Hurricane Michael did 2 years ago. We had major damage well up to just south of Atlanta from Hurricane Michael. That was like 300 miles inland. We had major catastrophic damage because it was such an intense hurricane, 300 miles inland. So this is what I'm telling you. You've got to be prepared for a potential multiple hurricanes and possibly very high-end hurricanes hitting the U.S., especially this year. This is really the year you've really got to watch it.
Well, I think that is extraordinarily helpful information for everyone, and we will recap that here probably in another way in a second. I want to play video from Hurricane Michael. You were right in the middle of it. Let's play this.
Okay.
There it goes. Boom. Oh, man, this is horrible. Super bad. Oh, my God.
All right, Jeff. So
that's a Cat 5. That was Hurricane Michael. I was on it from the get-go, and I was warning people 3 days ahead. This is going to be an intense hurricane. The models had it ramping up to near Cat 5 as it approached the coast. We hammered it hard, and we went all the way to Mexico Beach. Saw the storm surge literally about 30 minutes before the eye came ashore. I was in Mexico Beach where we had a 22-foot storm surge, and I watched the water rise from 6 a.m. till about 9 a.m. The water rose about 10 feet. It was right to the top of the wall. And at that time, I decided to go back toward the Air Force Base and then up toward the east side of Pensacola there. And it was brutal. I mean, the winds were 110, 115, the North Iowa. It was really, really bad. Barely made it back to my location where I was at.
So really Michael, as I recall, was supposed to hit Pensacola, I think, right? And then it kind of jogged to the east, and it hit a slightly less populated area. But you were right there in the middle of it. And in that video, it looked like, frankly, you were a lot more exposed than you were in Harvey. I mean, you're in your car and the wind's going right.
I had bigger buildings to hide around, I should say. But it was definitely scary. I mean, when you have a Cat 5 coming at you, there is so much going on, and we lost internet down there. Verizon lost the fiber down there. They had 2 or 3 fiber cuts in the area from flying debris, so I didn't have any communications at all. And but the most scariest part is when the eyewall got to me, went from this insane wind, and then it went to 50 miles an hour, then 30, and then down to 20, and I just got inside the clearing sky, the stadium effect. And again, you could look up and I could see this huge stadium effect, this big bowl, like this 10-mile eye of calm winds. And the sun was out, and I looked up, and I remember shooting that. It didn't last long, maybe about 2 to 3 minutes at my location before the hurricane moved in very quickly and just moved by me. And I remember one time I was standing in the sun, and I'll never forget this. I looked west about a mile and a half, and the only way to describe it was a black fog was the western eye wall. It was hugging the ground. So I'm in clear skies, and west of me is the blackest cloud you could ever imagine. But it was literally, it's the wall of flying debris. So on the ground, and I looked west. Think of a shower curtain, but in that wall of wrapping rain and 140, 150 mile winds, there was flying debris coming out of the wrapping rain like a fog bank. I could see huge sheet metal coming out of the curtain, going southbound and going back south toward the ocean at 150 miles an hour. And I knew when that back wall got to me, it was going to be unbelievable bad. And it was horrific when the back wall of that, when Hurricane Michael back wall hit, it was super, super scary. And it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was so black and so dark, I couldn't see 5 to 10 feet from the vehicle. It was that horrific. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
So go ahead, Jeff.
That's it.
Well, so you mentioned off camera here that you heard people screaming in their houses across the street.
Right. So early on, and Hurricane Michael was over at the Walgreens there. When the first high winds came in out of the north and northeast, there were over 100, 120. I saw the entire roofs across the street from me, literally about 50 yards across the street. I saw entire roofs of about 5 homes just pick up and go flying south. It happened that quick. And then as soon as that happened, I heard screams from across the street. People were screaming because they're in their home. The roof just came off. And there's no way I could have went over there because the debris, we were talking earlier about the debris. You know, I'm behind a concrete block wall, and I'm relatively calm here with a little ocean, the spray around the corners, but just outside of me 2 feet, the winds are 140. And the debris, I actually filmed part of Hurricane Michael. I know from doing a lot of video and high-res rapid frame rates that the debris was flying so fast, unless I shot it at 120 frames or higher per second, 120 frames a second, the telephone poles, I had complete telephone poles at about 10 feet above the ground, and they're flying southbound at over 100 miles an hour. But if I film it at normally 40 frames a second, it goes by in like a tenth of a second. A telephone pole goes by you, and you can't see it with your naked eye. All you see is a blur. You see a line blur, kind of like when somebody throws a fast, like a pitcher, and he throws it so fast at 100, 120 at the field. Unless they shoot it at a high frame rate, you can't see that ball because it goes by as a blur. Well, the cameras are the same way. So when I stepped up the frame rate to 120, I could actually slow the footage down so I could then identify all the flying debris. And I had a number of telephone poles flying literally 20 feet above the ground, horizontally like missiles. They literally like torpedoes. There were 20-foot long telephone poles just flying horizontally through the air at 140 miles an hour. And that's what hurricanes do.
That's incredible. I'm going to share now a video also from Michael that describes, I think, some of the aftermath. Okay, Jeff, we just watched this video, and what was that building that was all destroyed there? What was that?
There were several warehouses right there. One of them was Walgreens, and behind it they had a shopping center, and that shopping center part of the roof collapsed, and the front of the store collapsed at that location.
Is that where your car was in there in the shopping center?
Right.
Oh my gosh! And then we
had a hotel just about a block east of there. The whole front of the hotel collapsed as well, ripped off as a 5-story hotel fell down. Holiday Inn Express just watched it there, east of there, had the whole front of the facade tore off.
At the end of the video, you have a picture of what I guess is the back window of your car totally destroyed. What hit your car?
Probably piece of debris, a rock, of the roof, something went flying through the air and hit the back of the car and shattered the window.
When you're scoping out these locations, how do you do that? I mean, how do you decide when you're coming into Rockport, Corpus Christi
Right.
area, or, you know, in Hurricane Michael, I guess, western edge of Florida Panhandle? How do you decide where to go? Because it's not
Right.
like you know these areas like the back of your hand. What kind of
Right.
research do you do?
So you have to back up to it's all the way to when I was 18 years old. Okay, 40 plus years ago, and that was when I came right out of high school. I was building homes, so I was in construction in Tulsa for just under 20 years. So I built anywhere from 15 to 20 homes a year, from kind of the ranch style, call them first time homeowners type, 1,500, 1,800 foot houses. And the last 5 years, I built more estate properties, big 10, 15, 20,000 foot homes, the big homes. And so I have a real good understanding after building almost 500 homes in Tulsa from the how houses come apart, what areas are most likely to survive. And then obviously you're looking for concrete structures. You're looking at things that I also, it's not where I'm just looking at. You also have to calculate, this is probably this is gonna be really important what I say here, it's not where it's not where it is now, as where's it going to be an hour from now, 5 minutes from now, 5 hours from now. And that is, which way is the wind going to be blowing? And it's kind of like chasing tornadoes. It's not where you think it is now, is where's it going to be 4 hours from now when all the ingredients are just perfect so you intercept it. And same way with the hurricane, it's like, okay, when it's at this intensity, where most likely am I going to be? And your strategy changes hour by hour as it unfolds. So if it jogs to the right or left, so you have to scout literally a 20, 30 mile area along the coastline. It's not just one city or part of the city. You have to think about a 20, 30 mile wide area, because literally sometimes the last 2 or 3 hours, I'm jogging 5 or 10 miles east or 5 or 10 miles west, depending on how it's going to make landfall. And so if you're trying to get in that northeast quadrant, but if you go east, I got to think about flood zone. I always talk to local emergency management people. I look at flood maps, what roads are going to be impassable, how high is the storm surge going to be. So all these things are going through your mind. You have to calculate that in real time as it's unfolding, and you have to understand that risk and that threat. But it's you're constantly evaluating that in real time in your mind. Okay, I know I can't go over that bridge because this is going to happen. I can't get back across if this goes underwater. So you're constantly thinking about all those things as it's unfolding. It's a very complex, constantly evaluating things, but that's what you're going through your mind when you're looking at this. And I'm constantly watching radar and real-time weather data in my vehicle at all times. And so as things update by the second, I'm watching satellite, I'm watching the hurricane hunters in real time. I'm watching everything. And I get people privately send me messages when I'm out in the field saying, hey, this has happened, that's happened, watch out for this. The pressure's fallen 15 more millibars, it's continuing to intensify. So I'm getting these messages in from lots of different sources. And as that's unfolding, I'm constantly reevaluating my risk, where I'm located. And there's been times where I've been in positions where I know it's going to go under 20 foot of water, 30 foot of water, like Hurricane Katrina, down at ports, east of New Orleans, at that area down there where between Mobile and New Orleans, where it was really, really bad. At Wayland, Mississippi, I knew there was going to be 25 to 30 foot storm surge there. And I was in Wayland literally hours before Hurricane Katrina hit, but I left that area and I went all the way up to I-10 because I knew the water was going to make it all the way to I-10 on the backside of the Bay St. Louis. And that's exactly what it did. And that was a 25, max almost a 30 foot storm surge there. So you constantly have to evaluate those things. And that's why you constantly adjust your angle of attack and filming. And you want to be here for the next event. Okay. So I've done a really good job on that for 40 years. So, but yeah, I never take nothing for granted. I always am very situation aware of every event. No audio.
There we go. Better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I hear you.
Anybody that watches your Periscope will see that you're driving around a lot. And
Yep.
honestly, I've kind of wondered, okay, what is he doing? He's driving around so much.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and obviously with tornadoes, you've got to chase the tornado.
Yeah.
Tornado.
Yeah.
But with hurricanes, it sounds like what you're saying, and I asked this specifically because I think a lot of people would love to do what you're doing, but you go and you just sit in one place, and it sounds like what you're saying is that could get you killed pretty easily.
It gets you killed, but it's extremely dangerous. Yes, you've got to. I can tell you, every hurricane I've been on, and I'm over 40 of these now, the big ones. I've never left the house in Tulsa and say, "Hey, I'm going to Mobile, Alabama," and that's exactly where it's going to be, and I'm not moving. That's not reality, because weather is a fluid dynamic. It changes every minute, every hour, and even though the models have dramatically improved over the last 4 or 5 years, they're not perfect. And so you can adjust 20, 30 miles out the coast or down the coast, depending on what the weather pattern wants to do that particular hour or day, like we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years. Because it does, every weather event, those hurricanes always have you always have surprises. There's always surprises in every event, every time. There's no, I get surprised in every hurricane. There's always surprises. There's things you imagine happens out in the field that some things I can talk about, some things I can't talk about, but there's always surprises.
But you're evaluating a lot of information at one time, because if you were, well, let's just say if I was in that Harvey situation where I'm in the car wash across from the blue shed, I mean, I probably would have been cowering in my car and stayed in the same location. But if you had stayed in the same location instead of moving to the Walmart, what do you think would have happened?
I think the chances of the building still stood, but I think the chances of being hit with flying debris was extremely high risk, because there's so much debris on the ground. The winds come back around to that northwest and west as the hurricane's pulling away, and then eventually south-southwest. The chances of flying debris coming inside the car wash, now I'm north-south oriented, was extremely high. I mean, it would have absolutely been, you wouldn't even want to be there. We had to move. There was no option. Even if I had to walk on foot to another building, I had to move from that location at all cost.
So obviously, in order to make that judgment, you've got to have this experience and know-how. But I don't believe that you're a PhD meteorologist. You've got tons of experience. What point in your life, Jeff? I mean, go back through, like, what got you into this? Because
oh my gosh, that's that's 20 podcasts.
Let's condense it a little bit.
Yeah. So a short version of this is that when I was 14 years old, I was out delivering tombstones, head markers. Used to engrave those when I was 14, 15 years old. And my boss and I were out delivering those on a Sunday, Memorial Day weekend, back in '74. Came back into Tulsa. We had a huge severe thunderstorm in Tulsa, intense flash flooding with tornadoes, and the expressway went underwater. And so we exited the expressway. We ended up driving to 31st and Mingo, and drove over the 31st Street Bridge, Mingo Creek, and the 2-ton farm truck. You know about farm trucks down in Texas. You've been there a couple times. And so the water went above the farm truck, the 2-ton farm truck went above the windows, and we find ourselves literally fighting for our lives, and the water surging inside the vehicle, and I could see the water filling up on the dashboard, and my boss and his son rolled down the window and went out that side, got on top of the 2-ton truck on top of the bridge, and the water's encompassing the entire truck. And there's a park about 3 blocks away, and had railroad ties in it. Railroad ties are flowing down the creek. The railroad tie hits my boss, and his son was on his shoulders. They get knocked off the truck. They're going down the creek. And at this time, I'm 14 years old. I'm a very athletic 14-year-old. I swim a lot and basketball and road bikes. I was very, very thin 14-year-old, about 6 foot high. So I could swim really good. So when I got to the top, there was a wooden fence about 30 yards to my northwest. I jumped in the water with the current, and I swam like crazy over to the fence, held on to the fence. And the person watching me do that was the editor of the Tulsa World Tribune. From his second floor balcony bedroom window, he saw us get washed off the truck. So he called 911, Tulsa Fire Department, and said, "This is the location. 2 people are in the creek, and the third one's hanging onto the fence behind my house. Come out and help them." So engine 27 was dispatched, and with other engine companies. They got there, and the firemen threw ropes across the creek. The trucks are now flooded because the water's like 5 feet deep where the fire truck was. And they literally threw ropes over. The firemen came over, grabbed me by my neck, and they pulled me back across the creek. We all got on top of the fire truck as the water continued to rise for the next 4 hours, and we were stranded until about 10:30 that night. And I remember the fire captain called the dispatch and gave my parents a call and said, "Hey, we've pulled your son out of a creek. He's alive. we'll bring him home a little bit. And I remember about 3 or 4 in the morning, Tulsa police, they put me in a Tulsa police cruiser, and they drove me home. But I remember during that time, I watched cars flip by. I watched somebody get in the water, got bit by a snake, and it was still attached to his leg, and he was screaming for help. So I saw these really horrific, crazy things at 14 years old. And then a couple of years later, we had the big June, or just a couple of months later, we had this big June 8/74 tornado outbreak in Oklahoma, big, huge tornadoes. And I remember telling my mom that particular day, beautiful sunny day, it's 80 degrees. And I told my mom at 1 o'clock, I said, Mom, we're going to have tornadoes at 5. And she says, go out and play. It's a beautiful day. Nothing's going to happen. So I'm listening to radio in Oklahoma City, KRG radio, and I'm listening to radio, and they're talking about these supercells. Remember, I'm 14 years old, and we held the Roden McNally map. Okay, you remember those, right? And yet, 1 inch equals 25 miles or 20 miles. So I got a ruler out in my room, and I've got a Roden McNally. And the first tornado here in Oklahoma City, I put a little dot. And then about 30 minutes later, it hits the next town. I put a little dot. And then I hear the next town gets hit, and I put a little dot. So I started to say, okay, it's moving at 30 miles an hour in the northeast. I just drew a line, and I said, I added up all the dots, and I said, you know what? It's going to be Tulsa about 7 o'clock. So I went and told my mom at 1:30, I said, there's going to be big tornadoes in Tulsa at 7 o'clock. She says, no, there's not. I said, no, a tornado watch is out. It's coming from Oklahoma City now. And about that time, she looked out the window. You could see Cirrus, the big high canopy Cirrus blowing off way back southwest. And she goes, we'll go play for right now, and we'll worry about that later. I remember about 6:30, the tornadoes are coming into Tulsa. And I get out of the room, and I said, Mom, the tornadoes are here now. And we have a big plate glass window looking in Broken Arrow back toward Tulsa, South Tulsa. And I can see this huge, big wedge tornado coming into Tulsa. We can see it from 40 miles away. I said, Mom, the tornado's here. And she goes, I'll never forget her face. She looked at me and she goes, you were right. Here come the tornado. How'd you do that? Again, this is where we had, store tracking technology or mobile phones or any of that stuff. Just a nerdy kid in his room, listening to the radio.
In Tulsa. Tulsa seems to be Tulsa's got to be one of the hot spots for this sort of thing.
Yeah, we're pretty hot here. Central Oklahoma's hotter. But it's connected dots at 14 years old. I haven't that. I've always had that very technical understanding of things. And so it's connecting those dots to tell a story. And if you look 40 plus years later, here we are, later, it's still connecting those dots that tell the story. And my favorite thing about weather is understanding looking at a map, making a forecast, going to that location, know that something bad's going to happen, maybe 6 hours from now, maybe 24 hours from now, and be able to pick that needle in the haystack and go there. And if people ask, I'll tell them that, if they say, hey, something bad going to happen here, what's going to happen? Because I got a reputation. If I show up in town, it's not always going to be bad. But if I come to town, things can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you see Jeff Piotrowski come rolling into town, run. It's basically what it is. Yes, so Jeff, you mentioned earlier, you alluded to how you spent a lot of your career building houses. And that was how I think you maybe built up some financial assets that maybe make it a little bit possible for you to do some of this. Why didn't you maybe just go and become a weatherman or something? That's
a great question. I think I'm not one to stay behind the desk. I'm in sales. I sell weather equipment for a living, and I've done that for 28 years now. So you have to work comes first. You gotta have a good living. You gotta make a living, because whether you're playing golf or you're fishing or going to sporting events, whatever, it costs money. And being out in the field, it costs money. Gas, is a big chunk of that. Hotel costs. You've got you got internet bills, those kind of things, and then equipment. Just cameras and phones. Of course, if you think about it today compared to what we used to, I used to load a Mac in my car, one of those original iMacs, the original ones, the little small ones, the square ones, and little Macs, and had a phone coupler on it, and you can plug it in. And guess what my speed was out in the field? We pull up to a payphone. It was 1,200 baud. Think about that, 1,200 baud rate.
So for the kids that grew up only with smartphones,
right.
I'm now older than them. 1,200 baud is really slow.
It would take you about 30 minutes to load one page, right? So all we were trying to do is get the DOS-based text data
Okay, so you pull up to a phone, you call CompuServe 800 number from the payphone with quarters. We have to have a bunch of quarters, and that's what you do. And so you plug in the payphone, and then it's not CompuServe, and then you type in your commands of where you need some obs, just raw obs like the airport obs from West Texas or Western Oklahoma. And they come in one line at a time on the Mac. Okay, and then I would log off, and then I would take all that data I had, and then I'd do a surface map on paper, and it would draw, and they would have little quotations at the end of the observation. Childers, Texas Met report, 84 degrees with a 16 dew point, blowing dust, CB northeast. Tells me a thunderstorm developed. I didn't have radar then. I mean, there was radars, but not in the sense of mobile. And I was like, okay, a thunderstorm's developed north of Childers. I'm 80 miles northeast of Childers. So I can see something back there. So I'm going to start heading that direction. So that's what we did literally in the 70s and early 80s. It was that simple and crude. As always, I call it gut feeling. Follow your eyes. The clouds always tell you what's going to happen before it happens. If you watch out, if you watch the clouds, it gives you signals. I tell people, it's like putting a piece of puzzle together. There's all kinds of little pieces of the puzzle that start putting together. And when you watch the storm, the more those pieces come together, I know what's going to happen next because I can see the picture's coming clear. And it's that.
So Jeff, that is a fascinating topic because, of course, we only recently have these mobile, and we saw in the Harvey video you had the cell data radar map and everything, but obviously years and years ago you wouldn't have had that. So if somebody is outside and they see just some random storm or something, what indicates a really, really potentially destructive storm if you don't have any other data other than what you can see with your eyes, feel with
it depends on where you live. I mean, if we're talking about a tornado situation, I mean, if it's one of those warm, windy days and the winds are out of the east, southeast, but if a storm approaches you, if the winds start gusting really hard out of them, they could be out of the south, southeast or east, northeast, anywhere. If the wind starts changing direction as our storm approaches you, it's telling you it's sucking air. The thunderstorm, would think of air as like sucking milk out of a glass, and you got a straw, and everything's flowing from all 360 to that center of that straw. Storm's kind of the same way. That's how it breathes. It's everything's flowing into the storm. So if the winds pick up as it approaches you, not from the west where the storm's coming from or the southwest, but if the wind picks up out of the east, northeast, or east, southeast, gusting into that storm, that's generally a bad sign that the storm is intensifying. And obviously, if the storm turns green, which could be, it's a reflection of the hail aloft in the storm, like big hail, because the sunlight hits that and it reflects that light and gives you kind of a green cast on the lower part of the sky. So those are some things. Air start popping because the pressure's falling rapidly. You get big hail, you get bigger in golf ball. You start getting baseball, tennis ball, softball size hail. You really got to watch out. Something really bad's going on back to your west, southwest. If the storm's moving east, northeast, that's a big triple red alarm. If I get gigantic hail fall into your house, that's something really bad just to your west, southwest, potentially a tornado.
So one of the videos on Periscope where you were live recently and you were chasing tornadoes around, I believe it was Throckmorton, Texas. I think it was, an area in kind of near the Panhandle, and you were in a town, and you said that you heard a sound like glass breaking, and you decided that was not the time to stick around. Is that one of those things you look for, is weird sound?
Yeah. So and Texas is really good about this. So this is one of the reasons I like Texas a lot. In Kansas, is a lot of West Texas areas, they have metal roofs. Okay. And they're becoming more and more popular, obviously, for all kinds of reasons. And when you're in the rural setting, and I might be a mile or two from a farm, but if I hear a big bam, sounds like somebody takes a hammer and hits a metal roof, that's probably big hail falling down the road. And so when you hear that big hit, it's like, okay, there's probably big hail. And generally you get in the baseball, softball size, that's the kind of sound you're going to hear. And it's very distinct. I mean, it's literally like taking a baseball bat and hitting a piece of like a tin or a trash can that's metal. It makes a very distinct sound. And when you hear that, it's time to, you don't have to wait to see it. I know it's coming inbound. It's going to hit you soon.
Yeah, because what else? What else is it going to be if it's a sound?
Yeah,
like
it's
that?
pretty 9 times out of 10. It's gigantic hail falling.
So you're saying as these become more popular, Chip and Joanna Gaines, it sounds like have done a lot for storm chasing.
What's that? Oh, having the metal roofs?
Yeah, the
Oh,
Magnolia.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I love metal roofs for all kinds of reasons, from a builder's perspective and holding up to fires and hail damage. And yeah, I love seamless metal roofs are my favorite. Yes, absolutely.
So I want to queue up. I want to queue up a video of a particularly destructive tornado that you covered. But before I do that,
Sure.
I want to ask you, as we're kind of looking at the sky and trying to see what's going on, when a tornado is potentially going to form, what can you see in the clouds? I mean, do you literally expect to see, like, something that kind of looks like a tornado, or do you not necessarily expect to see that? I mean, is an inexperienced person that's out and about going to know basically that a tornado is forming, or is there some particular formation in the clouds that you have to look for?
You're going to see kind of a lower, and it also depends what part of the country you're in. If you're in the Southeast, you're going to be more rain wrapped. It's going to be much more difficult to see it. If you're in the plains, like Western Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, where you get in the high plains, or West Texas, they're much more visible. So you start getting a kind of a lowering of the cloud. There'll be a rain shaft on the right, in most cases, if the storm's moving to the northeast, and you'll get a lowering, kind of just a dip. This looks like a little sag in the sky, and that'll be, you just watch that little dip, and if it starts rotating over an area of the cloud, you just watch it, and sometimes you start seeing what we call little vortice tags, little tags underneath it, and dust will kick up underneath it. So that's one of the first signs I look for when I'm out in the field. That doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes you can have no dip at all. You'll just have a dust bowl on the ground, and then the dust bowl will pick up enough dust that actually forms the tornado, and then you see it visually with your eyes. But a lot of times the tornadoes on the ground, as they're first form in the very early stages, a lot of times they can be on the ground doing damage before you visually see the whole cone all the way connected to the cloud in the early stages.
Wow. So basically, just because you can't see it doesn't mean that there's not a tornado there. If there's a lot of rain, you need to listen to local authorities, it sounds like,
Right.
and get the heck inside if you hear that there maybe is a tornado.
Yes.
Get to that interior room. Well, let's look at this video of the Joplin tornado that you covered.
Yep.
And from what I was reading, this killed, before we watch it, people can keep this in mind, 158 people, and then another 8 people indirectly, and injured over 1,150 additional people. So let's take a look at this.
F4, maybe F5 going through the city of Joplin right now. South side of town is massive destruction. A mile-wide tornado that's tearing up the entire city. South side of Joplin, it worked. This is Jeff Piotrowski. I'm in Joplin. I have a very destructive, probably F4, maybe F5 going through the city of Joplin right now. The south side of town is doing massive destruction. It's a mile-wide tornado. Look at that. Search and rescue. Start thinking about search and rescue. Tulsa weather. Car got thrown in the car. Car got thrown out in the field.
Let's go see if they're okay.
I am. Okay, Jeff. So we're going to go back to that in just a second. But, for those who are listening, you're driving through Joplin, and there's just debris flying everywhere. There's sounds, obviously, car alarms going off. I mean, it looks, forgive me, it looks like hell. I mean, it looks like.
Yeah, it was apocalyptic. It was extreme bad. It was a long story with Joplin, but the first tornadic storm or first storm went north of the city, and that sent a boundary, kind of like a wind shift line down over the city. And the second storm developed back southwest of Joplin. It lashed onto that boundary and immediately started spinning. And then a few minutes later, it was producing this violent F5 tornado that was tearing across the city of Joplin. And Kathy and I, my wife, were there and watched it unfold. We watched the help get the sirens going. We saw a policeman on the west side of Joplin just before the tornado started touching down, and they'd already sounded the sirens before we got to town. We didn't know it had already went off, and we asked Officer Brewer to get the sirens going again, and they did. And they sound the sirens, and we filmed the tornado going through the city. It was horrific.
Jeff, how close were you to the tornado? In that video, it looks like, I mean, you can't necessarily see the tornado, probably because in Joplin, Missouri, I would imagine is one of those areas where, like you said, it's a rain-wrapped kind of a thing, maybe a little harder to see exactly where it is. So how do you know how close you are to it, or how close you get?
You look at the radar data that we had in the vehicle. That particular tornado, as it went from EF3 to EF4 to EF5, after it hit the hospital and was moving northeast up toward the Walmart and crossing 20th Street and southeast of Scheffendecker, that area, probably 2 to 3 blocks, was just southeast of us, and that's when the north wall was coming across us. And that's when my window blew out, and that was just to the west of Iowa Street when it was leveling the area near the high school. It was absolutely catastrophic at that point.
You'd mentioned the tornado sirens, and I've heard these because, even in southeast Texas, I mean, when I lived in College Station, we had a couple of tornadoes, there. And hearing that siren for someone in this part of the country, I mean, it's got to be one of the eeriest things. I mean, when you hear that siren, even though you're telling the local authorities, please sound this thing again. I mean, what goes through your mind? Does that just send chills down your spine to hear that?
Well, I mean, I've heard them thousands of times before, in particular on Joplin Day, though. It was, I believe in the people that live there tell me that the sound of the second siren probably saved thousands of lives, besides how people had died and got injured that day. It was a critical moment. If you take my 40-year history of storm chasing, it was the most critical message I'd ever given an officer, and me and Officer Brewer discussed that a couple of weeks later after we connected on the phone. And Officer Brewer told me later that he said, when you pulled up beside me, he said, I could see your radar display up on your laptop. And he said, I saw the fear in your face because I asked him, I said, how did you know to trust me? Because I asked him that point blank. And he said, it was 3 things. It was a tone in your voice. It was your display showing the big hook with the big black, this horrible look coming into the city, and he said the tone and the authority in which I delivered the message to him. He said he knew those 3 combined was the most important message of his entire police career up to that day from anybody. And he said that he knew it was serious and that something really bad was going to unfold, because I told him, I said, something horrific is going to happen here shortly.
And that was part 1 of my interview with Jeff Piotrowski, Emmy-Award-winning storm chaser. I hope you'll join me for part 2 with Jeff, where his wife Kat also joins us, and he continues the story of the Joplin tornado, as well as several other harrowing tales of his decades in storm chasing. Remember, if you like this show, please subscribe on YouTube and in your favorite podcast app. And if you have an idea for a guest or any other feedback, send me an email at jessfieldsshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.